7 o'clock a.m. here Eastern time in Boston, so I'd like to get started. For those of you who are new to my program, my name is Allie. I'm a doctor of physical therapy as well as a nationally certified Pilates instructor. I've been practicing here in Boston over the last 5 years. I own my own practice here and have been teaching with the Community Online Academy since it started back in March. It's hard to believe that we're already in the middle of September. Time flies, but I'm glad you guys are here with me today. What we have for this program is a 30-minute class on back pain. It's going to be almost entirely movement-based today. We'll do some stretching, we'll do some strengthening, and talk a little bit about form during all of those stretches and strengthening exercises to make sure that you are moving safely and you're getting the most out of this workout. That being said, I'm going to offer a number of ways to modify as well as to challenge the movements, especially for those of you who have been taking this class week after week. So I hope that you listen to your body, you take the option that feels right for you today, and that way you get the most out of this workout. So we're going to get started lying down on our backs with in a comfortable position. If you know that laying on your back, you need some support for your head, that's a great place for the using the pillow here. Otherwise, you can just set it off to the side. So you can choose to have your legs totally extended or knees bent, feet flat. So I'm going to start with my knees bent here. That is more comfortable for my back, especially early on in the morning. And just find a comfortable position to rest down. Let your head be heavy on the mat. Find the backs of your shoulders heavy on the mat. And think of your tailbone sinking down with your feet resting, equally weighted on both sides. And as you check in with your body, you feel the heaviness of your body down on the mat. See if you can start to imagine your breath. We're going to use our breath quite a bit today during our program. Well, hopefully we're breathing the whole time during the program, but we're going to use our breath to actually enhance our movements during the program. And I hope you guys can see how certain patterns of breathing can help you to deepen the connection with your core, as well as improve the flexibility of your spine. So as we lie here, see if you can open up your breath to take a bigger, deeper inhale than you might normally do, and a bigger, deeper exhale, letting go of that air. Inhale, breath in to open up, expanding the ribs wide out to the side, feeling a lift of your trunk. And exhale, feel the trunk narrow and close, letting go of some of that stale air that hangs in the bottom of your lungs. Taking another big inhale, breath in, and another exhale, breath out. We'll try one more time. Take that inhale breath in through your nose and an exhale breath out through your mouth. We're going to start with our first movement into the low back, a very gentle pelvic tilt. So if you imagine the space under your low back, you'll close that space and then open that space by gently rocking your tailbone front to back. So close the space and open, curling the tailbone towards your face and unraveling it away from your face. So this is a gentle movement. It should be pain-free. It should be within your body's comfortable range of motion. You can enhance this movement by pairing it with your breathing. So you're exhaling as you close the space behind your low back, inhaling to open. Exhale, close that space, and inhale to open. So if this is the first time you've done this movement, don't worry too much about your breathing here. As long as you are breathing, you're doing a good job. If you've practiced this before, I want you to feel the difference when you add in that breath pattern. We'll do just 3 more like this. Good, guys. Last 2. And one more time here, and settle somewhere right in the middle. Now from here, walk your feet together, knees together. Let your arms rest out by your side. Very gently, start to rock your legs from side to side. We're just warming up the spine to introduce a gentle bit of rotation into our low back. Try and keep your knees together, and it's okay for your hips to lift here, but I want your shoulders to stay down on the mat. Your legs will only tip as far as you can go without any discomfort or pain or pulling in your back. So this should feel comfortable. If you get to a point that is painful, just stop right before that point. So it's okay if your range of motion is small. I want you to work within that comfortable range of motion here. Good. We'll try about 4 more. That's it, guys. 3 and 2. One more time here, and then settle somewhere right into the middle. This time, walk your feet a little bit farther apart from one another, so they're about hip distance apart, and walk your heels in close enough towards your bottom to tap them with your fingertips. Feel your big toe, pinky toe, and heel imprinted down into the floor, and feel the heaviness of your feet equally pressing into the floor. We're preparing here to do a bridge. A bridge is an exercise that strengthens our glutes, which support our spine when we bend over, when we squat, when we lift things, but it's also a nice passive stretch for our hip flexors here on the front of our hips, which gets quite tight from sitting. So today, let your arms rest down by your side, push down into your feet. We're gonna start to lift the hips up and gently lower back down. Now work within your body's comfortable range of motion. It doesn't have to be as big as I'm doing here, but if you can, certainly work within the biggest range of motion that's comfortable. If you feel this in your low back, press on up, hold that lift, and soften the front of your ribs. So you want to draw the rib cage down so that the work is in your glutes and not across your lower back. Now we're doing this here as a little bit of a warm-up. We're going to do a bigger movement that looks similar to this a little bit later in class today. So for those of you who have been practicing, just focus here on trying to make sure that both of your glutes are working together as you lift up and gently lowering down. And if you're really not sure, you can always bring your hands to your glutes to give your brain a little better feedback about what's happening to those muscles down in your hip joint. Good. We'll try 3 more here. That's it, guys. Last 2. Good. And one more time here. Go ahead and drop your hips down. This time we'll walk our legs out straight and take our spine stretch by reaching our fingertips long in one direction, our toes long in the other direction. Now we have the option here to roll up to sitting, which engages some of our core muscles. If that's too much for your spine, you can roll to the side here and just press yourself up to a seat. But those of you who would like to try this, will take a big inhale breath. As you exhale, reach your fingertips up to the ceiling, look to your toes, curl the spine up 1 vertebrae at a time, coming all the way up to sitting. From here, we're gonna bend both of our knees. We're gonna do a little bit of core work today in an exercise called rolling like a ball, which is kind of a fun exercise. This is why I wanted you guys to have a little softer padding. It acts as a little massage for our spine. It's also a nice stretch for our spine, but it has a balance component of how does our core work in quicker type movements. So if you've taken this class, we work our core slowly, intentionally. This is sort of how does our core respond when we move a little bit faster. So you're gonna bring your hands behind your thighs, roll partway back to create a C shape in your low back, and pick up your feet and balance. Now, this might be tricky for you here on its own, and if that's the case, stay like this. If this feels really easy, I want you to drop your heels closer to your bottom so that your ball shape is a little bit smaller and continue to balance. If you can, we're gonna roll back, come right on up, balance without letting your feet tap the floor. So roll back, come up and balance. Now, if you feel like you roll back and it feels a little bit clunky or not smooth, that's telling you that part of your back there is maybe a little bit flat instead of that rounded shape. Imagine creating that nice even curve all the way back and all the way up. Now, also notice if your feet kick in front of you as a little momentum to come up. I want you to keep your heels as close to your bottom as you can and give yourself that true moment of pause at the top. Like I said, that reaction to balance is what we're really looking for here. Roll just to your shoulder blades, come right back on up. 3 more. Nice form there, guys. Awesome balance, good. 2 more, just to the shoulder blades, so not onto your neck, good. 1 more time there. Come right on up and then plant your feet down. Nice job. We'll take that into a gentle hamstring stretch. So for those of you who have had symptoms of sciatica, so pain radiating down into your legs, I want you to keep a soft bend in your knees. Otherwise, you can straighten your legs, but try and stack your spine up tall so your shoulders are right over your hips. If you cannot sit with your shoulders over your hips with straight legs, you can also bend your knees a little bit here. Keeping the spine super tall, instead of just draping our spine over our legs like you might normally do in a hamstring stretch, I want you to keep your back flat and hinge from your hips. Okay, it's going to make the stretch feel a little different. You can rest your hands down on the floor. You can still walk them forward, but keeping that flat back is going to minimize the compression in your back, but still give you a stretch in your hamstrings. It might feel different than what you're used to getting. It might feel like it's a little bit higher or perhaps deeper in your leg, and that's truly the hamstring muscle itself. Sometimes when we get set up in this position and we really drape over with straight legs, we pull on the nerve that's in the back of our leg, our sciatic nerve, and that feels different. Nerve actually is not a contractile structure, so it does not stretch in the same way that muscle does. We'll take a big deep breath in here. Keep tipping forward from your back if you're able, and an exhale breath to let it go, and then we'll restack coming back on up. We're going to flip over now to an all fours position. So if you know that your knees need a little bit of padding here, this is another great place to put that pillow underneath your knees. And then we'll set up in the all fours position. Now, if you have wrist sensitivity, make sure your shoulders are very slightly behind your wrists. Knees are underneath your hips. We'll run through a few cat-cows here just to explore our spine range of motion. So let your head hang around your upper back and then drop your ribs down, chest open. Let your head hang, rounding the spine, and drop your ribs down, heart opened, head lift. 3 more like that. Head hangs, and drop down, open up the heart. 2 more. Good. And 1 more time here, let that head hang, and come back to center. This time, we're gonna walk our right foot forward into a half kneeling position. Half kneeling meaning I have about a 90-degree angle in my front and my back leg, and then I'm going to pick my chest up. So this should feel a little bit wobbly. We're actually doing this here today as a balance challenge. This can also act as a nice stretch. So in this position, I want most of your weight to be in your front foot. And again, if kneeling is uncomfortable, give yourself a little bit of padding under that back knee. But it will help you to focus on putting more weight in that front foot where you're really grounded through your foot. Now notice if you feel like your body is sort of tipped to one side. Can you get your shoulders up and over, equally over your hips, and square your hips? Can you stack your shoulders right over both of your hips so you're leaning over your back hip? Well, really both of your hips in this position. Now, just hold. You can even reach your fingertips out in front of you if you feel like you need to. This balance here looks at the ability of your body to stay balanced and even for your spine in movements when your legs are doing 2 different things, which is very common. That's like walking, running, going up and down stairs. So notice how you feel your balance is here. Notice if you can pick your chest up a little bit taller, keeping the hips square. And a good way to check if your hips are square, I'm going to show you guys from the front here, is that both of your elbows should point out to the side. If you're holding your hips and one elbow is pointing forward, you know that your hips are rotated a little bit. So you can give that a try here. And we're just going to hold this for another breath. And then we'll take it right into our hip flexor stretch. So with my right foot forward, it's going to be a hip flexor stretch from my left. You might already feel that stretch by just being up tall like this. If you don't, you can bend into your right leg a little deeper than a 90-degree angle until you feel the stretch on the front of your left hip. You can also think about engaging your core and your left glute to help enhance that stretch on the left side. And like I said, our hip flexor muscle gets shortened in the position of sitting, which I think we're all doing quite frequently right now. And then we'll back on off of that stretch. We'll bring both hands down and we're going to switch to the other side. First challenging our balance and then challenging that hip flexor stretch. So left foot is in front, still 90-degree angles at both feet. You want to use your left leg to ground into the floor. So you feel like more weight is on that side, but at the same time, pick up your shoulders so they're right on top of your hips. Try and square your hips. You can bring your hands to your hips so you feel that your elbows point right out to the side and get your balance. And notice, maybe this side is easier, maybe this side is harder. Most of us have one side where we feel more stable and balanced. Just know that if you had to do a lunging task, let's say like you had to go pick up something on the floor, maybe this side is the side you want to use, or the side that feels a little bit more stable, a little bit steadier. Pick your chest up tall, and then we'll go ahead and take this into our hip flexor stretch for the right side. So you may already feel that stretch, in which case you can stay. If you need to bend forward slightly to open up the front of the right hip, you can do so here, continuing to work the balance by engaging your core, pushing down into your left foot, and engaging your right glute muscle. We'll hold this here for another big breath in, and another deep breath out. And then gently tip the spine forward, place both hands onto the floor, and swing that back leg around behind you. We're going to take this right down onto our stomachs next. So if you allow your spine to rest down, separate your feet a little bit wider than hips distance, line up your hands directly underneath your shoulders, and pull your elbows in by your side. From here, we're going to start to lift your back into extension. Extension is leaning backwards. So maybe you're comfortable lifting just your upper back, and maybe you're more comfortable pressing all the way up into your low back. Work within your body's comfortable range of motion, especially for those of you who this is an early class. If you're just waking up, be gentle with your spine. Work only in what feels good. So if you're getting pinching or clicking, slowly move through the available range of motion you have, but know that as you continue to press in and out of this position, it should get a little bit easier, maybe a little bit more comfortable coming up into a higher range of motion. Your feet should stay down on the mat, and I want you to try and keep your hips down on the mat as long as you can. While you're lifting your rib cage, think of your ribs giving your stomach a gentle hug so they kind of come up with you as you lift into this extended position. This is the opposing spine position to sitting. So this is the extended position. It also acts as a very gentle hip flexor stretch for the front of our hips. Good. We'll try 5 more here. Let your breath be comfortable and natural. Lower back down. 4 more. Drop your shoulders away from the ears. Shine your heart forward. Good. Last 3. And melting all the way back down. Good. Here, 2. And soften back onto the mat. Nice, guys. Once more here. Come all the way on up. Hold. Take a deep breath in here at the top. And a deep breath out. Slowly, gently melting the spine down. This time, push into your hands to round your spine up and back. And we'll take a gentle child's pose or shell stretch. So if you want your knees together, you can do that. If you're more comfortable with your knees a little bit wider than hips distance, that's also an option here. In this setup, you can choose to let your forehead rest right down onto your mat if that is comfortable. And then try taking a deep breath in where you expand the back of your ribs up to the ceiling, taking your shoulders down away from your ears. We take another big, deep inhale breath, expanding that rib cage open to the ceiling. And with your exhale, feel the ribs narrow down and together. And then gently press yourself on up to a seat. Okay, so we're going to take this into a spine stretch combo leg stretch movement. So it's a big movement. If you know that the back of your legs are really tight, so we did that hamstring stretch earlier. If that was pretty tight for you, I want you to grab your pillow here. You're going to sit on top of your pillow. If not, you're going to find a seated position with your legs open wide to the side. And I'm just going to adjust the camera a tiny bit here so you guys have a slightly better view. Okay, so you're going to be sitting in a comfortable straddle position with the legs open. Again, it doesn't have to be super wide, but from the side, I would like to see that you can sit up fairly tall with your shoulders on top of your hips. Okay, if you cannot sit up tall in this setup, this is where you're going to put a pillow under your hips to elevate your spine just slightly. You can also keep a soft bend in your knees as I'm doing here, since this is an early class for me too. So once you're in this position, sit super tall. You may already feel a little stretch to the inner thighs just sitting tall like this. We're going to add in a twisting movement from our spine, but I want you to notice how right now you feel even weight under both of your hips. I want it to stay that way as we go ahead and bring a spine twist in. So we're going to open up the arms, take up space, find your widest wingspan. Without wiggling your hips, twist and turn as far as you can to the left, come back to the center, twist and turn as far as you can to the right. This is going to feel fairly restricted here, okay? It's not going to feel like a huge movement, but I give you your arms open like this because I want you to use the reach of your fingertips in opposite directions to help enhance this stretch. This spine twist is for our thoracic spine, which is our upper back. We're keeping our lower back fixed to help improve the mobility of our upper back, which is often where most people are stiff, and that's why I say it's normal to feel a little limited in this motion. We're also getting a little rotation stretch in our hips by turning the orientation of our body while keeping our hips in the same position. Good. We'll try twice more like this. That's it. And one more time here. Good. And then you can bring your arms down, take a moment's rest, shake out your legs, but stay in this setup. That was our rotation stretch. We're going to do a little bit of side bending now, still keeping the spine super tall. Again, you can choose to sit up on that pillow, or maybe if you're feeling a little bit looser, take that pillow away. Open up your wingspan once again. This time we're going to dive sideways. So in this position, just notice if you're starting to slump forward. It's very easy to get crunched forward. In this movement, you want to purely move sideways. So if you imagine like you're leaning up against a wall here, see if you can stay leaning up against a wall, even as you move side to side, like you're brushing your hand along the length of that wall, maybe even like you're painting a little rainbow up and over your head to bend the spine sideways. Good. We'll try 4 more there. 3, 2, 1 more time, just like that. Good. Now we're going to gather the legs together. We'll bring the soles of our feet together, and we'll finish here with a butterfly stretch. So we actually have on the inner thighs, we have some muscles that go past the knee joint, some that stop before the knee joint. We just got the ones that go past the knee joint. By bending our knees now, we'll get the ones that are shorter than our knee joint. So from the side, I'm sitting up nice and tall, just like our hamstring stretch before. I'm going to keep that flat back and just hinge forward. So I'm not rounding my spine, my head is not dropping down, I'm keeping that long flat back and gently hinging forward. And I know that many of these cues may be different than what you're used to hearing or feeling for some of these more traditional stretches, but this is the best way to still do these stretches while protecting your back if you're dealing with back pain. Keep your heart open. We'll take a deep breath in here and a deep breath out, and gently letting it go. Good. And then you can bring your legs together with your knees bent. So we just spent quite a bit of time kind of working into that hip flexibility. Hip flexibility in different planes takes the stress away from our low back during movements that include twisting, rotation movements, as well as side bending, which is, you would be surprised we sometimes do that. Let's say you're reaching down into your car to pick something up, or you're kind of turning and reaching for something back behind you. What we're going to do now is building to that bridging movement that we talked about earlier in class. My apologies. So if you were someone who felt like you got a lot of pinching in your hips during that last exercise, this will help to rinse out some of that feeling. So you're going to take your hands, reach it back behind you about 6 to 8 inches. I like to point my fingertips out to the sides, especially for those of you who have any wrist discomfort. Push your fingertips to the side. Now we're going to end up lifting our hips in a bridge, but before we do so, open up your heart in your chest. So take your shoulders down away from your ears, push into the floor behind you so that your elbows are straight and your chest is as proud as it's ever been. Now I want you to keep your chest in that position as we start to move our legs. So ground your feet into the floor. Just like our bridge, we're going to press our hips up to the ceiling and then gently lower and tap them back down. I call this kind of our reverse tabletop. You may have heard of this as crab walk, something along those lines, but it should feel very similar to a bridge. The movement from our hips is just like what we did in bridging earlier. So you want to feel your glute muscles work to create this motion. Now it's much harder for the glutes to work if our shoulders are collapsing. So keep that proud open chest. It's also a nice chest opener for those of you who have tightness across the front of the shoulders. Push the hands into the floor, lift the hips, and gently lower back down. Ground your feet down into the floor and feel the feet continue to push into the floor even as you lower your hips down. We'll try 5 more like this. Good, gently lower back down, shoulders open, reset if needed for 4. Gently lower and tap the hips, push the hips up, lift for 3. Working within your body's comfortable range of motion, keep your eyes on your knees to protect your neck for 2. Good. And we're gonna hold up on this last one. So again, keep your head forward instead of letting it drop back to the ceiling. We hold for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Drop your hips back down. Nice job. So we're gonna finish our class in standing. You guys can come up to a standing position in any way that is comfortable for your body. And we're gonna work just on a little bit of active standing. So I always like to get people up and moving. Like I said, we're spending a lot of time sitting. Let's get active in our standing position. So your feet should be parallel underneath you, feeling your big toe, your pinky toe, and your heel pressing down into the floor. So just like that last exercise we did, I want you to think of pushing your feet down, but now at the same time, think of lifting your ribs off your hips. So we can create space for our spine if you're dealing with compression in your spine by just changing the way we stand, pushing the feet down, lifting the ribs up. So that creates this long line of energy for our low back. Make sure your shoulders are stacked over your hips, hips right over your knees, all your bones are stacked. You're in your tallest alignment you've had. We'll take this now into 3 big community breaths together. So we take an inhale, reach tall. Exhale, let it go. Keep that height of your spine. Another inhale breath, reach tall, get long. Exhale breath to release, let it go. Once more here, another big inhale. And an exhale breath, release, and gently let it go. You can shake it out. Awesome work, guys. So that was our movement-based part of the class. We have about 2 minutes left in our program today, and I'd like to spend that time answering any questions that you guys have about what we did today or other questions about back pain. Since we are that nice 5-star class in a small class size, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself. You should have that option now. To ask a question, you can also write it to me in the chat if you're more comfortable that way.
Hi. When sitting on the floor with legs outstretched or knees up, I find it difficult to keep my knees together. Like when we were rolling back, I find it difficult just to keep my legs facing on. It feels more comfortable to let them fall to the sides. I was wondering if there are exercises I can do to strengthen them.
Yeah, that's a great question, Hannah. So sometimes that movement, that's called hip flexion, so the ability to pull the knees in towards the chest. Sometimes that is limited because of true range of motion restriction in the joint. So people who tend to have arthritis in the hips might be tight, pulling the knees in towards the chest. But sometimes it's also a restriction of soft tissue in the area, and we get what's called impingement. So if you pull the knee in too far towards your chest, you get a pinching in the front of the hip. Impingement is usually more related to a balance of the muscle groups in the front of your leg and the back of your leg. So you want both of those muscles to work together during different tasks. What I see a lot is that the muscles on the front side of the body get really strong, but also really tight. And the muscles on the back side of the body get a little bit weaker. So if you are dealing more with that impingement type feeling where it's pinching in the front of your hips, the strengthening for the glutes that we worked on today helps to balance the muscles in the back. And as you practice, that gets a little bit easier and easier. So the types of movements we did today should help with that. If you are dealing more with that arthritic type pain, certainly some of the stretches, just simply pulling your knees in towards your chest. We didn't do those today, but we do those a lot in some of my other back pain classes. Those can be helpful to improve the true range of motion in the joint itself. Okay, so Rebecca, this is a great question. She said, similarly, when doing the seated hamstring stretch, I feel more tension or stretch in the front of my hips, legs, and hip flexors, which limits my ability to do the hamstring stretch. Is that impingement too? Yes. And so if that's what you're feeling, I would encourage you to straighten your legs a little bit more. You can also separate your feet just a little bit wider than hip distance. So one way that we turn our hip flexors off, which Hannah, this goes along with why you feel like you can't keep your legs together, is with external rotation movement. So by slightly separating your feet, you may be able to turn the hip flexors down just a little bit so that you're able to access those muscles on the backside of your body. As you progress and you get more comfortable with these types of movements, you can always bring the legs back to that more parallel position. But hopefully that makes sense to you guys. It's something that's very common. I deal with that a little bit myself, and it's always an ebb and flow. I think it's always worth it. I've spent a lot of time sitting because that really engages the hip flexor and drives the femur forward in the socket to make it more difficult to feel the muscles on the backside of your body. Any other questions you guys have?
I had a question, Ali. Hi.
Hi, Arlene.
Hey, thanks again for a great class. It's really, I always feel so much better after. But I had a question when we went from all fours to then bringing one leg forward in right angles.
Yeah.
And you said to keep your shoulders above your hips, but your weight on the front foot. I found that really hard to actually put the weight on that front foot. It just felt like it was hanging there. Have you got any advice on that?
Yeah, that's not uncommon either. And part of the reason that's difficult is when you put the weight in the front foot, it's asking your glute muscle to work, right? So that's what stabilizes us in that position. However, with our knee bent at a 90-degree angle like that, your glute muscle is stretched. And so our muscles, they have an ideal length at which they can contract, the fibers of the muscles can contract. When the muscle is stretched already, it's harder to contract the muscle. However, that's also a point where we need a lot of support for our body. And so building up strength through those muscles in other positions will help you to put more weight into your front foot to be able to use the glute muscle, even though it's stretched. So if it felt hard, that's normal, but it's a sign, it's telling you that yes, your glutes, maybe they're strong in certain positions, but they could benefit from a little bit more endurance, a little bit more repetition so that they're able to fire not just when they're in this perfect setup, but when they're also lengthened a little bit. And the reason that position is important, it looks like lunging. It's also, do you have support at the bottom part of your squat? So if I were standing here and I come down into that 90-degree angle, am I still able to use my glutes here in the same way that I am when I'm standing up here? It's much harder at that bottom part of the movement, so it's normal for that to feel tricky, but that's sort of the goal with that exercise. And I think probably you'll find that one side was easier than the other to do that, and that may just indicate maybe which side is a little bit stronger, more stable.
Thank you. So any advice in terms of how to strengthen it? Is it doing more of that exercise, doing squats, lunges?
So the bridging exercise, I think, is probably the easiest one to strengthen because bridging brings your hips into an extended position at the hardest part of the movement. The extended position, so where you're kind of standing or your hips are flat, is the easiest time for our glutes to fire. So for someone who is generally getting used to this, helping the glutes warm up, wake up, bridging is one of the easiest ways to start. That reverse tabletop exercise we did today is similar. It's a little bit harder because you have less contact with the ground, but it's a similar movement that the higher part of the exercise is in a flat position for the hips. So I would start with those types of movements, and then you can always build in squatting, lunging also help, but they are a little bit harder. So if you're finding that it's hard to engage them in those movements, go back to the basics. I think bridging is one of my favorites. Awesome. Any other questions?
I was finding that doing that sitting with your legs wide and sitting up, when I was leaning forward, I was actually feeling some unusual pain in my back, in my lower back.
Okay, when leaning forward.
Yeah.
Okay, So for that one, you want to be stacked, not leaning forward, or do you mean when we did the butterfly version of that stretch?
Yeah, it was worse in the butterfly. With
Okay.
feet together, it was worse then.
Okay. So what you can do in that situation, if it feels worse on your back, there's, certain back conditions, it's dependent on the day and sort of the setup of your hips, but try bringing your hips a little bit more narrow, and see if that is something that helps to relieve the pressure off your back. Sometimes having the legs super wide just pulls on the ligaments around your back. If you bring them a little bit more narrow, that might be the solution that helps. So kind of lifting your knees closer to the sides of your body.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.